Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Elevation Association Experience. We are your hosts, Dr. Dan Nelson, Dr. Jared Hill, and we're going to continue on our series, our KPI series, our Key Point Indicator series. So we'd like to encourage everybody to go back and check those out, get yourself up to speed on this. And hey, Jared, Ryan I think we've hit the big time, man. I think the speaking of KPIs, the indicator is that you get a negative comment on YouTube. So we finally got a negative comment on YouTube for one of our podcasts.
Yes, somebody wasn't happy that we told the dentist that they should diagnose more, aka they weren't happy that we should told the dentist that they need to be comprehensive in their treatment planning. And I asked the patients if they want an ideal treatment plan. They weren't happy with that. That's why they said that's why they hate us. So
First, who's listening to our show? That's what I want to know. Like, here I am thinking it's Dennis. Apparently, it's Joe from Sheboygan is listening to our show. I don't know. This is I'm excited, man. We broke through. We're now mainstream. So
yeah, we did.
Congratulations to us, right? Uh, it made me laugh too because I was thinking about how I had a patient who I love the guy yesterday who was mad at me. We did this bridge that was a hot mess doing herodonics, and we did it a couple of months ago. And he came back in and he had a issue with an adjacent tooth, and he's like, "Well, why didn't you find this?" It was covered up by the gingiva. It was subgingival root caries. He didn't pick up on the X-ray, and he hadn't been in for an exam in 2 years. So he just comes in when he has a problem, right? And so he presents with this total blown out hot mess number 30. It's a abutment for a 3-unit bridge, and it's everything I can do to get it done in the time slot that I've gotten. And he's mad. He's like, "Well, why didn't you check the tooth behind it?" And I'm like, do surgeons check your hip when you go in for a knee surgery? I was like, no. I was like, man, like I'm focused on that one thing. I said, that's why we have exams, and like you haven't been in 2 years. So we just had a laugh. Yesterday was a lot of like, oh, come on, guys, what's going on here? Anyway,
It's your fault, Dr. Nelson. Fault.
What's that, Jared?
It's your fault, Dr. Nelson.
I put it there. You're right. It was me. Uh, Crown done in over 10 years ago, and it was my fault that it's decayed out. Well, hey, man, I'm excited to talk about today. This is one of my favorite topics. You know that, and people that have come to some of our summits know that I actually do a presentation on this topic, and I think it's a pretty brilliant topic. I think it's one that again, as we're kind of hitting these things that are a little misunderstood, I think this tackles one of these other misunderstood KPIs and discussion points.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'd love to talk about this. This is, we're talking about, speaking of patients and patient experiences, we're talking about patients and we're talking about growth and in practice. And today we're going to talk about growth doesn't come from just more new patients, right? It comes from keeping the right patients and delivering that exceptional experience that fuels referrals. So I'm excited to get in and break this down this episode, and it's going to be we're going to talk about setting realistic goals, what that means in your practice, and what that means for you. We're going to talk about retention versus churning, meaning how fast are we blowing through these new patients? How much do we value each one? We'll talk about some patient experience metrics, some referral strategies. We'll talk about all those things in order to be able to increase your practice, the quality of the patients that you have. So looking forward to that. Let's talk first about, Dan, if you don't mind, the myth of more. I need more new patients. That's one of the KPIs that most people look at, and when you're just looking at a practice or evaluating a practice, most people ask the question, what is your new patient count? How many new patients do you have? And a lot of times the thought is, if I just had 100 more new patients per month, I'd be set, or 50 more new patients per month, whatever it is. That's a common myth, when in actuality, you don't need more new patients. You need the right new patients. So we'll talk about how chasing volume without value leads to burnout, not growth. And I think that's what we need to talk about during this section here.
Well, I don't, it's a, I don't, I think it's an unhealthy mindset for a practice just to be concentrating on how many new patients do I have? How many new patients do I get per month? And I think this comes from a couple places. I think one, it comes from the marketing companies, because the marketing company has to be able to say, yeah, we can deliver this, how many people we can get in your door each month. And so they focus a lot on that metric, right? Like that's where their bread and butter is, and that's how they get paid. And that's how they can show that they're successful. But I think that it leads to a distorted mindset for the docs, because as they look at it, they get hyper focused on that number. It's like, how many new patients do I get per month, without really starting to focus on how many patients am I losing per month? Why am I losing those patients? How are we losing those patients? Right. So, that they should be focusing on net growth, which I think most do. But I think that the problem is that and it's twofold, is one, not watching the back door, and then the second is just this idea of got to have more of everything, more patients, more of this, more of that, more of that. And it, like you said, it's not focusing on the quality of the patients or what you're trying to get. If it's just quantity you're after, there's an easy formula for that, but it may not lead you to what you want. You're going to get burnt out pretty quick doing the things you hate doing.
Yeah, and to add to that, the wrong patient, Dan, is actually going to cost you more than what they bring in. You have this, if your focus solely is on simply new patient count, you have operational chaos within your office as well. So it's a matter of getting the right patient in, the right amount of patients, and then keeping those patients that you want that match your core values and what you set your practice to be. Because not every new patient is a good fit for your practice. You can't be everything to everybody. You need to be the person that the right patients need in order for you to find success and fulfillment.
Totally. Yeah. So I think that the question that that owners need to ask themselves, not even owners, just like if you're in the practice, you should be asking yourselves, do you know your actual active patient retention rate, right? How many patients are you keeping, especially um, as you're looking at turnover? We're working with a practice right now that's seen a lot of turnover on their new patients, which is not good, right? So it's like, okay, what is your retention rate? Is it ebbing and flowing? Do you know why it is? Do you have somebody that's chasing your patients out? Or is it you? Or do you have a policy? Is there a protocol? Is there a procedure? What's happening, or a lack of it? Do you lack a proven process? There's so many things that need to go into say, okay, what is my active patient retention rate? And if it's dropping or ebbing and flowing, can I go back and reverse engineer why that's happening, look at it and understand it, right?
Yeah, where do they go in and where can somebody find their active patient retention rate? How does somebody find that metric?
You know what? That's a so it's funny you ask that, because that one's a little bit trickier to get. Um, and for you guys, again, I feel bad that I beat up on people's poor office managers, but I would challenge anybody that comes across this and listens to this. Go ask whoever it is, if it's your office manager, business manager, yourself, whoever it is that's in charge. If you have a patient coordinator, go and ask them, what's our active patient retention rate? And then ask them if they can get it within the day. And I guarantee that nobody's going to be able to come up with that right away. It's a tricky one to get. So even if you have practice management, or if you have data software, it's going to be a trickier one to get, because you can look and see what your lost patients are, and you can look and see what your growth rate is. Um, but you're actually going to have to do some math and separate it out and figure out, okay, based on the current year, how many are we losing? There's a simple formula to do it, that you can get a rough guess. Well, it's not super rough, but the easiest way, Jared, is just to do the math on what year to year what you're losing and gaining net. So it's not super hard to get, but the accuracy is where you want to pay attention, because it's not just that superficial number of like, oh, I just uh, take and divide it over take the active patients over the year by year and divide that into each other to find out what my retention rate is. You actually have to go in and find out, okay, are they, when you have active patients, are they really active patients, right? So that's where the challenge comes from is that some of those patients, if you know, those of you who dental intel, practice by numbers, you go in and it says active patients. Well, these are people that have been in the last 18 months. What quality are those patients? Are those patients that are transient? Are those patients that are, actually lifetime patients of your practice and have slipped through the cracks? Are these people that are since moved? Getting the data accurate on that is a little trickier than it sounds, but you can get a general idea fairly easy.
Yeah, it's important to know that and to figure that out and to take a little time to dive into that a little deeper because that's an absolute number that you have to know because now you're talking about not just new patients, but you're talking about retention. So there's a lot of factors that play into your active patient count and how many you retain because really your retention is your ROI of your acquisition. So you're spending money on acquiring patients, whether you're hiring a marketing company or whether you're doing it yourself, whether you're on social media or the radio or TV ads or whatever it is, you have this acquisition cost and your retention rate is actually your ROI of that acquisition cost. And so you need to know what that is. You need to understand. And when they leave, when patients leave, you need to understand why they're leaving as well. So let's talk about real quick a system that we use at our practice at Wood River Dental for this is obviously we have dental intel and we believe strongly in having our team members be very involved with these goals. So we have one of our team members who was assigned the patient retention rate. And so she uh, is involved of at the end of the week reviewing this number. How many new patients did we get? How many left, and why did they leave? And so on Monday morning, when we have our meeting with our entire staff, we have our patient retention rate or patient retention number. And for that week, it might have been -2. And we'll say, oh man, why was it -2? And she will be able to explain, well, we had 8 new patients here last week, but we lost 10. Three of those were due to, or 7 of those were due to inactivity. 3 of those were due to transfers or whatever reason, and gives us a brief explanation so we know and understand on a weekly basis if there is an intervention problem. If that number was, oh, we had 8 new patients, but we lost 10, and they all transferred to another office, then that would be a red flag. Okay, what are we doing? What happened last week that we couldn't retain the patient? Then we create an issue. Then we can talk about that as a team, so we all know and understand what's going on. But I think having a system for being able to review what that is with your team, I would say on a week, I think this is one of those KPIs that is a weekly metric KPI to review and to know and understand. Because if you wait till a month, you could have, like you said, you could have 50 new patients and you could be celebrating 50 new patients, whatever that is. But you could have lost 60 or maybe you lost 70. And now you're at a -10 patient retention rate or growth rate or -20, and now you're a month behind, which is a lot of times that's more difficult to dissect. It takes more time. So I think that this is a weekly KPI metric that you should review.
Yeah, and I think you just brought up a good point, Jared. And I think it's important to be able to distinguish between retention rate and retention count, right? So the count leads to the rate. So rate is, we're talking about, as we're discussing this, your rate is your percentage. Your count goes into what that rate is, what that percentage is, right? So, and I want to just give a quick example. You've kind of alluded to it and talked about it in this of why I was saying this is complicated to find sometimes. So, what we've done is we've tasked our team, which we'll tell them, hey, try to keep that active patient base up to date, do what you can. And a lot of times they'll go through the patient list and do an audit. And when they do an audit, they update that. They get things to where all of a sudden we'll have one week our lost patients, and we'll call them, or inactive patients, will be huge. It'll be like 20 or 15 or something like that. For our office, that's a lot. And we go, hey, what, Sandra, why is this number so, why is this count so high? And it's like, oh, we did some cleanup on this. We went through and we cleaned up a bunch of accounts, cleaned up the patient charts, and updated it. So as long as your office is doing that, your retention rate number is going to be much more accurate. But if you don't have someone actively cleaning up charts and your data, it's going to skew what you're getting because that loss number often isn't tracked. Because when people move, when people transfer offices, when they pass away, whatever, if someone isn't actively keeping that on top of that when that happens, and some of it's hard to track. So if they're not doing that, your numbers are going to be dirty. We talk about that all the time, right? Like pick a metric, dirty data in, dirty data out. And so this is one that you probably should have task someone, like you said, Jared, to on a weekly basis, keep track of these things. This is going to make them mindful of it. And this is going to help them to focus on, once a month, whatever it is, once a week, to go through and clean up that patient database so that you have accurate numbers and can go, okay, yeah, we know the influx coming in. Patients coming in, new patients, that's easy to track. Patients that are going inactive or leaving, a little more difficult to track. So that's where it becomes tricky. So yeah, those are some ways that I have always loved. This is like I said, I do a whole presentation on this because I love it so much. That offices should be looking at the net growth of their practice, and not just that, but also how many patients do you really need? Like if you don't even know how many you need, then if you're just growing, just like randomly, like, oh, we just need to grow. How do you know what you actually need? So I think that I think we need to talk about that for a second as we're discussing this. Is not only okay, everyone's so growth focused, growth, but to what end? How many patients does your practice need?
Yeah, I think this is a great topic because this leads into the topic of sustainable growth, right? If you have 100 new patients a month, that's not sustainable. You're not, there's no way you're going to take care of everybody, keep track of everybody. No way that there are all the patients that you want to have and service in your practice. So the sustainable growth actually comes from, this aligned new patients, not just a higher head count, but the ones that you have. And so it's having these quality patients that are coming in. So yeah, that's a great question. How many do you need? Really, what is the actual number that you need? It's going to depend on your capacity as a provider. Like how many hours are you working per week? How many operatories do you have? Or what is your ideal production per visit? Meaning, how efficient are you in the chair? What is your retention rate? Meaning, if you retain a lot or the majority of your patients, then you don't need a ton of new patients coming through the door. You just need the right ones going through the door. And then you need to think about this too. Think about like your referral package. Like, do you have an in-office benefit plan? Do you have some sort of in-office benefit referral package for your current patient base or for your staff or whatever that is? That's going to lead to how many new patients that you need per month. And I would say for a healthy established practice, having 15 to 30 quality new patients per month is going to be a ton. It's going to be a lot. It's going to be a very manageable system, meaning when they come in, they can have the right new patient experience. They can feel like you've made a connection with them, and they will come back because they've had a good first visit. If they have a bad visit one, they're probably not going to come back for a visit two. So these are all whatever your philosophy is for your practice. We encourage an elevated practice to elevate your life and to not go through or I should say to avoid burnout. Having this high quality patient experience will decrease the amount of new patients that you actually need to have coming through the door. So
Well,
it's there's a cost. There's a cost to not retaining your patients. I mean, poor retention costs you a lot of time, money, effort, and energy. And so, this consistency in this patient retention is going to help you avoid a lot of those things, especially burnout, which is a big deal for somebody who's been in practice for 8, 10, 15 years.
Well, I actually have some data on that I want to get into in just a second about actually the cost of retention versus acquiring a new patient. But before we touch on that, I really want to talk about this idea of how many patients do you need. Because I remember in dental school, that was like a hot topic when we had a very rudimentary practice management course. And that was one of the things we talked about. And the number was thrown out there of 3,000 patients per doc.
How
I
many?
3,000,
3,000?
3,000. Yeah. I don't know where that number came from. I don't know who got it. I don't know, like, I I have no idea where it came from. And that was the number I had in my head forever, was like, oh, you have to have 3,000 patients per doc. And so I think that part of this metric, how many patients do you need in your practice? Like, I think you touched on some of the really important components that go into that. I think the other one that you have to look at is what do you want? How much are you trying to produce? You know, what kind of practice are you running? Are you a fee for service? Are you insurance based? Because those factor into um, how many patients you need, right? And then the other thing that we looked at is if you look at optimized practices, typically the numbers more around 1,200 to 1,500 patients per doc for a full-time practice if you're talking two hygienists per doc. If you do that, 3,000 patients is going to put you at overcapacity for your hygiene team if you have two docs, four hygienists. You probably will need to, if you're optimized, and this is a big deal. So if your recall rate is high, your reappointment rate is high, your new patient reappointment rate is high, and you have a team that is functioning really highly, then you're going to probably need five hygienists to serve, maybe four and a half to serve 3,000 active patient base count. And if you're fee for service and you're just chasing a collections goal, it can realistically be less than that. So these are things to consider when you're going through and say, how many patients do I really need? And this is something where someone, you probably ought to have some type of consultant or coach to help you out with this, to figure out where you need to be. It wouldn't take you super long to figure out, okay, probably a meeting or two to find out, okay, this is how many patients I actually want. This is how many we need. This is how many we can service reliably. That's the reality of it. Is it's a lot less than people think if they are optimized. And I think that's the big asterisk star, whatever, is that it needs to be understood. Like that's how many you're going to need. Now, 15 to 30 patients, assuming that you're not running just a free exams or free Zoom ads all the time that are going to be transient patients through your office. 15 to 30 will service the amount. And what that is referring to is the amount that you need to replenish, assuming you're already at the level you want to be. So again, this is not taking into account someone that's maybe in de novo or whatever that's trying to grow. This is someone that's more established. How many patients are you going to need to replenish the people that move, they die, they get sick, whatever. 15 to 30 is going to be plenty to keep that patient or that practice rolling.
Yeah, it's you get into this trap of growth. We talked about this, and you alluded to this. If you're efficient and you're optimal, if your production per hour or production per visit is optimal, then you don't need to see 100,000 patients. Like you don't need to overload your schedule because you can have this is an interesting thing that I had to learn as a young dentist too. Is you can have a full schedule, but your full schedule can be empty of opportunity. I mean, you're just getting people in the door and filling your hygiene schedule, but if there's no opportunity in there, then I don't know how much value it has. The most productive practices are pretty selective on their patients. So, and that comes with time. And you said that too. Like if you're just growing, if you're starting from scratch and you need to see some patients, and if you're still developing the character of your practice of who you are, so be it, right? Like that's a different story. But once you start to develop your practice and you brand your practice and you start to see who you are, you can afford to be a little more selective with the patients that you come in. And that's all these building blocks of creating your ideal practice, right? You're creating your ideal avatar, you're setting your BHAG, big, hairy, audacious goal for whatever your practice is, and you're making these little steps towards what your ideal practice is. So you're learning how to run your business rather than letting your business run you. I think this is a trap of new patients as well. If you start to just flood your practice with whatever random new patients because maybe you sign up for every insurance plan under the sun, your practice now is running you rather than you running your practice. And I can tell you from personal experience that leads to burnout faster than anything else.
Yeah.
Is
Yeah, for
un,
sure.
unintentional growth. It's like the growth, as I've said this several times, it's the ideology of the cancer cell. Growth for growth's sake. It's not healthy. You really need to be intentional with how you grow.
I always think I always say it's the practice is running you. You're not running the practice. In my visual for that is I always have this uh, picture of a big dog pulling this poor. I actually use it in one of my presentations. This huge dog pulling this poor lady along. This old lady that just gets like the dog takes off and the lady just gets chucked because she's hanging onto the leash. That's what it's like, and it's the same thing. Trying to do that all the time and fight against something that's pulling you along rather than you leading it along. Totally different, right? Yeah,
Yeah,
big
totally.
time burnout. So I want to transition here, Jared, really back to what you were saying a minute ago about the cost of retention versus the cost of acquisition, right? So going back to our presentation from one of our summit presentations, um, I've got a little bit of data here, so I'm gonna pull it up on my phone. I don't have my glasses, so this should be fun. Um, the average dentist in North America spends around $400 to $500 on marketing just to get one new patient in the chair. So what's interesting about this is let's just take we can use two examples. One is a flyer blast. So on average, $2,000 flyer blast leads yields about 5 or 6 phone calls from new patient. Out of those 5 to 6 phone calls, about 2 to 3 results in new patients. So that means that the dentist spends around 300 to 400 per call and around 700 to 1,000 per new patient. And that doesn't even take into account like e-blasts are worse. They only yield about one patient for every 1 to 2,000 emails. Now, email blasts are cheaper, but you can see what is the cost of retaining your patient. So making sure that they are reappointed, taken care of at the time is way cheaper than losing those patients and just having poor systems so that you're just doing turnover. So yeah, we're just beating the dead horse here, but you get the idea with actual numbers on what it costs. So totally, way smarter to garnish and nurture the patients that you have in place, right? It's the
Yeah.
same thing as why would you plant a tree and let it die and then just replant another tree, let that one die? It doesn't make any sense.
Yeah. Yeah. You need to look at the overall value of the patient, like you said, and the cost of your marketing, how to get the best ROI. A quality new patient really adds a lifetime of value. You're adding them to your practice. Whereas if you get a rushed one in, you're just adding short-term stress. That's a good way to look at this is like, okay, if I'm just rushing them through, I'm just going to be stressed. I'm adding stress to my life. We all know that the potential health risks of living on a high stress life the entire time. We say this, I don't know how many times we've said this then, but sometimes you have to slow down in order to speed up. And I think that this is that concept of getting the quality patient in, retaining the quality patient, and that's allowing you to slow down in order to speed up. You're gradually building this quality patient base that your practice needs in order to have the
Right.
the one you want. And also, there's when we're talking about like growing and growth, like you can't scale a revolving door. So people are coming in, coming out, coming in, coming out, coming in, coming out. That's not a scalable practice. If you want to scale your practice, you've got to focus on the patients coming in, retaining them, and then building your practice based upon that over time. And it's not easy to do. I
No.
get it. You get stressed. I don't have that many new patients, but it takes a little bit of time to develop and grow that, but it's totally worth it.
Yeah, I 100% agree. And I think rather than we're touching a little bit on like marketing. This isn't intended to be a marketing episode. But I do want to talk a little bit about the cheapest way to get qualified good patients into your practice, and that's referral system. Um, we haven't tried to grow in a while, Jared. So we have a referral system. We don't really push it very hard, but it is something that that if anyone wants to see what we're doing, we'll be happy to share what our referral program is. You just reach out to us. We'll share that with you. No problem. We're not going to charge you for it. We can just show you what we've got. But referrals are by far the cheapest way to get patients in. And I think the key points on a referral system is that you need to have some authenticity to it, right? Don't make it gimmicky. Gimmicks don't work. That's going to get you a transient patient that's just going to, like you said, it's going to hit the revolving door. You're not going to build a practice off those. You need to get your staff involved. If your staff isn't involved, if they don't have buy-in, good luck getting it to work, because you as the doc are not going to be able to push it along by yourself. No way. So staff has to have a lot of buy-in on it. And then you need to be quick on whatever system you're doing. So timely gratitude, and make sure you're following up with the patient or with the referral, excuse me. And with our system, we actually do it twofold. So that whoever refers gets a gift card, and then the person being referred in also gets a gift card. So ours, it's make sure they get those in a timely manner. That way you can do follow-up and have the proper processes and protocols in play. This way that it becomes effective. Also track it. That's the other thing. You want to make sure you're tracking it. So that's one of the great things about a referral program versus other marketing areas, is that it's 100% trackable. You can check and see, oh, how successful is this? Do we need to modify it? What's working with it? What's not, right?
Yeah, this is there's so much that goes into this. I mean, as far as like Dan said, we're happy to share any and all of our information of what we're doing at our practice at Wood River Dental. Also, if you have more questions regarding how to do this and what to do, we have a community, Elevation Association, where we openly collaborate and share ideas. We've got the website School, SKOOL, where you can go and ask questions, and we can, it's kind of that closed private Facebook group, but it's on a different platform that really gives opportunities. There are opportunities to learn more about this on that same school platform. We have continuing education courses on this, and there's just a lot of opportunities just to continue to grow. But I can't understate more, or I'm sorry, can't overstate more the importance of this KPI. Growth isn't always about more, right? It's about finding, attracting, and keeping the right patients. And you have to be able to track that on a weekly basis to know and understand how you're doing with that. And that's the basis of this. Like, if you're growing but not profiting, right? So, I mean, if you got all these new patients, if you're growing, 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 that to me is a flow problem. Like, too much. Like, you need to understand the flow rate in order to be able to make it a profitable return on whatever that flow is. And most people are like, oh, I don't have enough new patients. Maybe, maybe not. I would focus more on the retention of those and where they're going if they leave your office, rather than just getting them in the door. Getting them in the door is like one aspect of it. It's like if you are trying to improve your health, you step on a scale, that number only shows you one thing. It shows you how much weight is on that scale. It doesn't show how much of that is muscle, how much of that is fat. It doesn't show how much of that is anything. All it shows is a simple number. And this is
Yeah.
this is a very similar experience to that.
Yeah. Yeah, I 100% agree with you, man. This is one that, again, I have a lot of passion about. I get really frustrated when it's not tracked and it's not tracked well. And the reason that I like this number so much is that it's a symptom to much bigger problems in your practice, but it's also an indicator of things that are being done right, And so um, it's important to take a look at this metric, track it well, and then be able to look and say, okay, if we're losing a lot of patients, why are we losing them? And if your retention rate is high, you know, um, go and see what's working well and double down on some of those things. Again, you can build a referral system off those things that are working well. So, if your front desk is rocking it and they're doing an amazing job, and your assistants and your hygiene team are absolutely ballers, and go and find out like what is happening. Why do people appreciate your practice? identify those things, double down on those, take those to market, and allow that to build. If you want to build or strengthen your practice, if you want to look at it that way, bolster your practice. And on the flip side of the coin, if your attrition rate is horrible, your retention rate is terrible, like go and look and find out, like, why are we terrible? Why is this happening? Don't be afraid to ask the patients, like to send out emails. How can we improve? Send out a text. Notice that you transferred offices. Sorry to lose you. How can we improve? We're constantly trying to improve. Try to get patient feedback. People are more likely to leave negative feedback than they're 7 times more likely to leave negative feedback than positive feedback. So those are things that you'd probably rather tap into on a personal message than you would on your, say, Google reviews, right? So these are some places that you can really capture some good information to help you to recover and turn around that part of your practice if you're struggling. And of course, again, use some data software to track all this stuff. Make sure that you're reviewing this stuff on team meetings. These are things that will help you to, again, bolster your team, bolster your practice, and give you a lot more security, take a lot of stress off your plate. Jared, before we wrap up, any other thoughts on any of this?
No, I think we've covered it all. I think you could talk about this forever. Just, a lot of this falls back to your ideal patient. Don't let your insurance dictate your ideal patient. Don't just focus on if somebody promises you, which is what an insurance company will do. Will promise you we can bring people in your door. Great. Well, what type of patients do you want? One loyal patient is worth more than 10 one-time visits, right? You need to focus on the type of patient you want. Create your avatar and do your marketing to go get that person through your door, and that person's going to be way more valuable new patient than your other one.
Right. Well, before we wrap up, I just want to give a shout out to. I've got my St. Gaspar Hospital T-shirt or shirt on today, Jared. I want to give a shout out to our friends over at St. Gaspar Hospital in Natigi, Tanzania, where we have our Dental Legacy Foundation dental clinic. One of them that we work out of. I figure I might as well wear it today on the podcast and kind of showcase and give them some love. So. And just a quick reminder for everybody: if this is something you want to come with us to Atigi, go check out Tanzania, pet a lion. Then let us know. You don't really get to pet a lion. Also, I'll probably get in trouble if I didn't, correct that. It can't be petting lions, man. Don't pet lions, people. Don't pet lions. Also, don't pet cheetahs. Don't pet leopards. Don't pet any of them. Having said that, Jared,
Don't
we did pet some lions and
Warthogs,
stuff
nothing.
at a zoo once. Okay. All right. Awesome show. Appreciate everybody. Again, tune in next time. We're going to continue this on and getting close to wrapping up this KPI series. And we've got some exciting guests coming up as well. Be looking for those shows. So feel free to drop us an email. Feel free to check us out at elevationassociation.com or send us ping us a email at elevationassociation@gmail.com. Until next time, we'll talk to you then. Cheers.
Thank you. See ya.